Last year, I decided to try the Inktober challenge for the first time, and I had so much fun, I'm at it again this year. So here is part 1 of my 2019 Inktober challenge. The Inktober challenge is an annual exercise for artists to really stretch ourselves creatively. The goal is to create one illustration or drawing for every day of October. The creator initially had traditional pen and ink in mind, but the whole goal is to sort of stretch our artistic muscles. So a lot of different artists have really gone and run with it and put their own spin on the challenge. For instance, there is an official list released every year with 31 one-word prompts, one word for every day of the month. And a lot of artists do stick with that. Some people just sort of draw whatever they want that day, and it's all pretty much whatever you want to do as an artist. Since last year was my first year, I really wanted to sort of stick with the general feel of the challenge and see how that went and how I felt about it. So last year I definitely stuck with Sharpie and ink pens, kept it very much traditional black and white ink, and I decided to stick with the prompts. And I really enjoyed that challenging aspect of it. Even though I really love high contrast in my artwork, I don't usually work with strictly black and white and really only do pen and ink if I'm doing some minor outlining in sort of my fashion illustrations. Straight up pen and ink is not my typical sort of media, so it definitely was a challenge for me, and so I enjoyed that aspect of it so much that I've decided to stick with that this year. So I'm going to be limiting myself to a pen and a Sharpie in just straight black, and I am going to stick with the 31 given prompts. And because I'm crazy, apparently I'm also going to try to keep every day to a Disney theme as well. My main goal last year was to actually complete all 31 drawings. I didn't want to end up only doing a portion of them. I really wanted to complete the entire challenge. And I did end up posting 30 illustrations last year, but considering the one day I did miss, I was in the hospital after having an emergency surgery to remove my appendix, I think that's a pretty good excuse to miss one day. So barring any medical emergencies, I think I should be able to get all 31 drawings this year. So I've taken my current sketchbook, and in the top corner of 31 consecutive pages, I have numbered the pages and then written the prompt for that day. I didn't necessarily do that last year. Some days I wrote the prompt for a day down once I was ready to start that drawing, but I kept going back and having to look up the list of prompts so many times, I decided having them all written out in advance in the sketchbook in order would be very helpful for me to not have to be constantly looking up the prompt list. I'm also going to try and limit every drawing to 1 hour. I really just don't have time to be coming up with 31 super detailed illustrations that really aren't going to go anywhere or give me any sort of a finished product that's worth doing anything with. So I really like the idea of, again, adding to that challenge aspect and trying to get some sort of a reasonably fun and interesting illustration in an hour or less. If last year is anything to go by though, there's a very good chance that some days I'll just get sucked into it and go over, but there's probably also going to be some days that whatever I decide to draw are a lot simpler, and I will end up with some much faster drawings as well. The main thing that I think really helped me stick to the challenge last year was posting my drawing every day to Instagram. So I'm really upping the ante this year, and I'm going to post them all here on YouTube. So every Thursday for the month of October, there will be a sort of time lapse of all of my drawings for the previous week right here on this channel. So if you're interested in that and following my challenge for the month and maybe sort of keeping up with me to make me actually post all my drawings, please like and subscribe down below and ring the little bell and you'll get a notification every Thursday when I upload my Inktober video, and also I will have other wonderful themey Halloweeny videos every Monday for this month. Since I'm allowing myself up to an hour for each illustration, and after today there's going to be 7 illustrations per video, they're going to be pretty sped up, and I'm going to go ahead and I think I'm going to skip, for your viewing pleasure, any of my sort of research and rough pencil sketches and just skip straight to the inking process. So here we go with the first drawing for Inktober 2019, and today's prompt is ring. Now obviously a lot of the Inktober prompts are kind of open-ended and they're supposed to make you think. Of course, I immediately had thought bell and was trying to think of a different sort of ringing the bell type aspects that would tie into Disney. But then, of course, I also was really liking the idea of trying to come up with some Halloween-y drawings because that was a lot of fun last year, especially as I got further into the month. Having some more Halloween-y, spooky drawings was a lot of fun as we came up to actual Halloween. So, of course, I'm thinking of, goblins and ghouls and scary things. So, of course, I think ghost. And when I think of ghost and a ring, I think of the bride from the Haunted Mansion. I always love being in the attic of the Haunted Mansion and having all those different wedding portraits for that bride, and I just think that's one of my favorite parts of that ride. And I love the idea of her having a collection of wedding rings that she has just acquired from all these marriages. So it really made sense to portray her in my first picture. With this illustration, I really want to keep the texture and the detail restricted mostly more to the background or to tie into the parts of the illustration that really make it the bride. So I kept her and her dress pretty simple, not a lot of shading. I mostly shaded in the background, keeping it kind of dark and shadowy, sort of spooky because it's up in that attic. And then I sort of implied the rafters and floorboards with a little bit of wood grain to keep that the sort of detailed and real looking areas. But I'm keeping the actual ghost aspect very simple, plain white, not any real shading happening there. I did a little bit of detailing texture here on the lace of her sleeves and her dress, but that was mostly because that area I wanted to draw the eye to the hatchet and the ring on her finger, because that is the whole point of this drawing, is that ring and the fact that she's a happy bride. Oh wait, why does she have a hatchet behind her back? It's fairly simple, but overall I'm pretty happy with this drawing. I think it turned out a lot of fun. I think that major Disney fans are going to know what I was going for here. Even though she's not exactly like the bride from the ride, she's definitely very heavily inspired by her, and I think you can kind of get a really good idea of the character pretty quickly, and it's a lot of fun. And even if you don't know the character and you don't know the ride, it's spooky and Halloween-y, and I kind of love it. Day 2's prompt is mindless, and I had a little bit of trouble ironing out exactly what I wanted to draw for today, but eventually I was pretty happy when I decided on Hei Hei from Moana. Hei Hei has a very weird character design. It's funny because there's so much that's based very firmly on a real chicken's anatomy, and yet there's places that it just goes all wonky. Finding reference images was kind of hilarious, and eventually I did find a few that I kind of combined to make a pose that I thought was kind of fun. I didn't want to really put much background to this. I wanted it to say kind of empty and vacant, but that was only going to add to that whole mindless mentality thing we have going on here. I really just wanted you to see those goofy eyeballs because I love those about Hei Hei, and that he always seems just a little bit smiley and just a little bit happy, even though he has absolutely no idea what's going on because ignorance apparently is bliss. There's not a lot of visual texture to Hei Hei. There's really a little bit of shading to his character in the actual movie, but mostly he's just a lot of different tones, which would have been overall values. But I didn't really want to go crazy with the shading on him. I wanted him to still feel kind of soft and fluffy. So instead I just sort of did some varying, slightly different line weights to texturize the different colored areas. But I kept it very simple shading-wise. I did, however, do linear shades everywhere that was supposed to be feathery, but his legs I used sort of little half moons so that he would end up with sort of that pebbled texture of a regular chicken leg, so that you would have a little bit of differentiation between those two areas. sign and date, and Hei Hei is finished with day 2 of Inktober. The prompt for day 3 is bait, and I really did have some trouble ironing out this one. For some reason, I kept going back to like mermaids and trying to come up with some way of like Ariel and baiting and fishing with Eric, and it was just weird and nothing was really coming to me. And then I was like, hook, fishing, okay, Captain Hook. And then I'm like, okay, well, he was a pretty good bait for Peter Pan for the crocodile, and I always loved that scene and how the crocodile swam in with just his little eyes peeking up out of the water, and I always thought that was really cute. So of course I have a very dapper Captain Hook here. I gave him pretty much exactly what he's just wearing in the movie, but I did make his hair a little bit fancy because I always loved that in the live action Hook movie, that really big fancy curly wig. I always thought that was a lot of fun, so I gave myself a slightly more dapper Captain Hook here. I did a little simple, hatching and cross-hatching for my shading. I filled in a couple of the larger areas with my Sharpie just to speed things along a little bit. I wanted to keep the interest on mostly Captain Hook, so on the less important aspects of this drawing, like the cliffside and the ripples in the water, I kept the line weight pretty pale, not too dark, not too thick, and not a lot of extra detail, just enough to give me a sort of environment. And then I kept the heavier line weight shifts to Captain Hook and the crocodile, with the extra special hatching and cross-hatching mostly on Captain Hook because he is the main feature of this drawing, but I did do those little semicircular shading again on the crocodile, kind of like I did yesterday on Hei Hei, to kind of imply that crocodile skin. This is probably not my favorite drawing I've ever done. There's some weird perspective issues happening because I didn't really put a lot of time into it, but I think it's kind of cute, it's kind of funny, and overall I'm pretty happy with where it ended up.